Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. The ASEAN turns 58 today, but the region is no longer just a ceremonial partner in Korean diplomacy. It's now a frontline player in the shifting power dynamics of the Indo-Pacific. As U.S. China tensions deepen, the ASEAN is pushing to assert its strategic autonomy, and South Korea is moving fast to align with that goal. Under President Lee Jae Myung, Seoul is signaling a pivot from idealistic slogans to hard-nosed, pragmatic engagement. With high-level envoy visits, renewed policy frameworks, and back-to-back summits with key leaders, South Korea's ASEAN strategy is being put to the test, and the stakes have never been higher. For a deeper discussion on this, we connect to Professor Park Jang-sik, Director of the Institute of ASEAN Studies at Dongguk University. A big welcome, Professor.
Yeah. Good evening. My pleasure to be here.
Good to see you. Now, also joining us is James Chin, Professor of Asian Studies at the University of Tasmania. Good to see you, Professor Chin.
Good evening.
Okay, now let's start our discussion with Professor Park. So today,
Yes.
ASEAN now marks its 58th anniversary. Professor, could you explain for us the strategic and economic importance of the ASEAN for South Korea's diplomacy? And also, how do you see its status evolving recently?
Yeah, over the past decades, ASEAN has emerged not only as key economic partner for South Korea, but also as a vital player in the broader Indo-Pacific strategic framework. First of all, when you think of economic and strategic significance of ASEAN in South Korea's foreign policy, ASEAN is South Korea's second largest trading partner and third largest investment destination. I think these two facts sufficiently reflect the real nature of the economic relationship between South Korea and ASEAN. In 2023, trade between South Korea and ASEAN surpassed $200 billion, underscoring the depth of economic ties. I'm sure ASEAN will be the greatest partner in the trade of Korea within 10 years. And secondly, for the recent changes in ASEAN's standing or influence leverage, ASEAN has struggled to present a unified stance on key issues, especially concerning Myanmar's military coup, China's assertiveness in the South China Sea, and U.S. China rivalry. Most recently, a border clash between Thailand and Cambodia has raised the concern about crisis in ASEAN unity, but the issue is expected to be resolved soon. So finally, the recent elevation of ASEAN-Korea ties to a comprehensive strategic partnership reflects Korea's long-term commitment to the region, I believe.
So that really underscores how ASEAN is no longer just a regional bloc, but also a core part of Korea's strategic map as well. Now, building on this, the ASEAN has long pursued strategic autonomy by maintaining a balanced approach without leaning toward any one major power. But amid intensifying U.S. China tensions, we want to ask Professor Chin, what is the importance of cooperation with South Korea in helping the ASEAN secure its strategic autonomy?
Thank you for that really important question. So I think in terms of strategic autonomy, I think the key word here is ASEAN centrality. ASEAN understands that it's really, really important to keep the Southeast Asia region very stable and predictable for many, many reasons. But the very clear reason why ASEAN has to be the center of all these diplomatic efforts is simply because a lot of the world's energy supply pass through the South China Sea and the Straits of Malacca. So if anything were to happen to Southeast Asia, that will affect the rest of the world. And I think South Korea understands this. For example, South Korea new Southern policy is really about South Korea supporting ASEAN's centrality and helping ASEAN to maintain regional stability. And I think for the ASEAN side, I think they value the contribution of South Korea. In many ways, South Korea have lots of things that are similar with ASEAN. Both are what we call middle power countries, so they can come together and help each other. So I think the reality is that ASEAN, as the previous speaker has spoken, they do not really want to take a side between this rivalry between the U.S. and China. They're just trying to make sure that the region is stable and is open for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Of course. Like our Professor Chin has mentioned about the new Southern policy, the current Lee Jae-myung administration is expected to upgrade that policy of the former Moon Jae-in administration into a more so-called pragmatic direction. So in this case, Professor Park, what should be the top priorities for improvement or reinforcement in the Lee administration's ASEAN policy?
Yeah, but to transfer from a goodwill-based approach under Moon government, actually I participated in the program to a more pragmatic, strategic, and future-oriented ASEAN policy. The new Lee Jae-myung administration should focus on security engagement, digital green cooperation, resilient supply chains, and especially I'd like to stress on this, human connectivity. These areas will define the next phase of Korea ASEAN relations, especially as Southeast Asia becomes more critical to the regional order and global economic flows. Among them, I'd like to emphasize the fields of human connectivity and public democracy. People-to-people ties have lagged behind economic ties. Korea's soft power, including Korean wave, is very, very strong, as we well know. But mutual understanding remains shallow. And so 3 policies are recommended. So first, expand the education, scholarship, and youth exchange programs, and increase ASEAN cultural centers in Korea, vice versa, improve language education and intercultural competence, and finally, support migrant worker and student communities from ASEAN in Korea to promote a more inclusive and sustainable bilateral relationship.
Well, that would be a very good direction moving forward. Now, let's turn a little bit to recent diplomacy. South Korea has been dispatching presidential envoys to the ASEAN region. And most recently, on July 23rd, I believe, President Lee's envoy made an official visit to Malaysia, which was the first special such visit sent to an ASEAN country since Lee took office. So, Professor Chin, what diplomatic message do you think was conveyed by choosing Malaysia as the first destination?
So I think the destination of Malaysia is in many ways a very logical way of approaching this issue. As many of your viewers know, Malaysia is the chair of ASEAN this year. And the South Koreans are basically sending a very strong signal. They're hoping to work with the Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim to elevate the relationship, not only between Malaysia and South Korea, but Malaysia is chair of ASEAN to elevate the relationship between ASEAN and South Korea. I think it's also very important to note that Malaysia is probably South Korea's 10th largest trade partner. They were doing trade in the region of almost 20 billion, and everybody expect this to go after the conclusion of the FTA agreement, which will probably be finalized this year. I think both leaders are looking for new ways to elevate the trade relationship, and they're talking about things like the digital economy, the green economy, and as mentioned already, the supply chain issues. I think the South Korean president also wanted to assure ASEAN that South Korea recognizes ASEAN's centrality. And he also was trying to promote more people-to-people links between South Korea and the ASEAN countries.
Right. So choosing Malaysia, the host nation, wasn't just symbolic. There was clear intention behind that choice. A lot to look forward between the two countries moving forward. Now, following the presidential envoy's visit to Vietnam on July 29th, Vietnam's top-ranking official, To Lam, General Secretary of the Communist Party, is set to visit South Korea on August 10th. Professor Park, what diplomatic symbolism and strategic significance does To Lam's visit to Korea hold?
Yeah, simply saying, the Secretary General of Communist Party in Vietnam is the #1 leader, is the most powerful figure in Vietnam's political system. So ranking the president and prime minister, as we all know that. As far as I know, this is the first visit to South Korea by Vietnam's de facto top leader, Secretary General To Lam. The visit of To Lam means the highest level of political recognition and trust in the bilateral relationship. Vietnam places a strong emphasis on political party-to-party diplomacy. And he's the Secretary General means the Communist Party. He represents the Communist Party, the most important political party. So I say this diplomacy, party-to-party diplomacy. And this visit symbolizes the ideological legitimacy and mutual respect, which is rare in Vietnam relations with the non-communist countries.
Right. So it's definitely a very important and significant visit by this Vietnamese de facto top leader. Now, as part of his visit, of course, we are expecting a summit with President Lee Jae Myung on August 11th. Professor Park, what do you think could be the key agenda items for talks between the two sides?
Yeah, at the August 11th summit between President Lee and General Secretary To Lam, the leaders are expected to focus on strengthening the comprehensive strategic partnership established in 2022. A top priority of ASEAN will be expanding bilateral trade and investment, first of all, especially in high-tech sectors such as semiconductors, electric vehicles, and digital industries. And the two sides are also likely to discuss deepening cooperation in defense and security, including defense industry, collaboration, and maritime stability. Vietnam has shown a strong interest in Korea's advanced defense system, including K-2 battle tank, K-9 howitzer, Chunmoo missile system, and then finally AF-20 fighter jet also. Supplying Korean-made weapons to ASEAN countries like Vietnam, which perceives a growing security threat from China due to the problems of South China Sea, could significantly contribute to strengthening bilateral relations in a strategic direction. Such a cooperation will not only expand Korea's defense exports, but also help build a more stable regional security network. Of course, this is not something that can be pursued unilaterally by Korea alone. And finally, human resource development, including education exchange and vocational training, may also be emphasized. That they are expected to explore ways to improve conditions for Vietnamese workers and residents in Korea. So the summit seems to recognize again mutual trust and long-term strategic alignment.
Right. So we will be definitely watching closely to see if the summit could bring some tangible results, either on security issues or digital areas, or even human resource areas as well. So as the U.S. China rivalry intensifies, Vietnam continues to pursue balanced diplomacy. In this context, Professor Chin, what diplomatic impact could a stronger cooperation between South Korea and Vietnam actually bring?
So I think it will bring a lot of benefit for both countries. Both countries are middle powers. And I think the Vietnamese really like the idea, they're pursuing this idea called bamboo diplomacy. So they're trying to make as many friends as possible. As you mentioned earlier, Vietnam and China are actually both claimants to several islands in the South China Sea. But I think it's also very important to point out that South Korea is actually Vietnam's largest foreign investor, something in the region of U.S. $90 billion. So Vietnam is really looking towards South Korea for really high technology transfers and to build up its network, especially the 5G network. I think the Vietnamese are a bit hesitant when it comes to Chinese products. So they're hoping that South Korea can produce these products, especially in 5G. But I think at the end of the day, the Vietnamese understand that because of this competition with China, they need as many friends as possible. So it's really a way of counterbalancing the U.S. China influence in the South China Sea and in the region generally.
Mm-hmm. Now, Professor Chin, let's move on to the broader landscape. So, in order to strengthen South Korea's presence, there are growing calls to enhance cultural, educational, and people-to-people exchanges like we've been talking about across the ASEAN. What kind of policy mechanisms or agreements do you think must be actually prioritized at this point?
So I think there's a lot of things that South Korea and ASEAN can do. As the other speaker has spoken, the key to it is really people-to-people interaction. So we're talking about things like global Korea scholarships. You can actually bring a lot more students from ASEAN into South Korean institutions. You can do things like the Korean exchange, ASEAN education exchange program. You can bring faculty exchange. You can do joint research project. And of course, one of the things which ASEAN is really bad is that the university sector, especially in countries like Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, all this, they can really learn a lot from Korean universities, especially Korean science and technology universities, which is really world class. So I think there are lots of opportunities there. The trick is really for Korea to push for this. Especially people-to-people exchange, but also in the culture areas. As you know, Korean culture, especially K-pop, is really, really popular in Southeast Asia. So there are many avenues for things like films, music, and digital content. So there are actually a lot of opportunities, and several Korean brands are very well known in the region as well. Samsung mobile phones are really well known. Generally, the people of ASEAN regard South Korea as a very high-tech country. They want to really learn from South Korea. But the problem is that the South Korean government has not been very active in pursuing a lot of these exchange programs. They actually have a lot of MOUs signed, but somehow they're sort of paper MOUs. They haven't really been implemented yet. So it's really, the onus is really up to South Korea to really put resources behind all these programs and push for people-to-people interaction, because that's really the key relationship over the long term. That's how you build friendly relations over the long term.
Right. So let's hope this opportunity could boost such kind of efforts moving forward. Now, before we let you go, Professor Park, briefly, just as we're looking ahead to October, the upcoming ASEAN +3 summit to be held in Malaysia is expected to be a first major test of the Lee administration's diplomacy. What kind of strategies are actually needed at this point?
Yes, really, the last government, so they stopped any kind of a special policy on ASEAN. So this time we have to show something very special and pragmatic one. First of all, I think the new policy toward ASEAN is expected to be announced before next week's National Liberation Day of Korea, August 15th, before that. And along with that, there will likely be some actionable items that can be implemented immediately. So, but here I'd like to mention a couple of things that should be included in that policy. First, I'd like to say three things. First, we should declare this support ASEAN centrality as the foundation of regional peace, prosperity, and multilateral cooperation. Secondly, South Korea will be ASEAN plus 3's partner of choice in digital transformation and green economy. And finally, as responsible middle power, as Professor Chin indicated before, Korea offers balanced, constructive solutions to regional challenges. Yeah, that's it.
All right. That will be the real stage to see if all these moves actually translate into regional credibility with all the answers that you've mentioned. But as for now, we'll have to conclude our discussion here at this point. Thank you so much for your insights tonight, Professor Park and Professor Chin. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.